Well, hello everyone, and thank you for coming this evening. We are so excited to welcome you to our fundraiser for Relentless Hope Ministry, which helps survivors of sex trafficking here in America. My name is Casey, and I work for Relentless Hope Ministry, and my husband Dan is the pastor here at Canyon Road Church. During our fundraiser tonight, we will have 4 different speakers, 2 of which are survivors, who will be sharing their stories of healing and freedom. Our ministry exists not only to help survivors of sex trafficking, but to raise awareness and to help people understand the dangers of it here in our own backyard. As a pastor's wife, I have studied human trafficking, sex trafficking, and sexual abuse extensively over the years so that I could better help counsel our church members. But within the last few years, I felt God calling me to do even more. So I was praying and I was crying out to God and asking him to show me how I could help survivors here in America. I remember specifically one evening, I was begging God and said, please, let someone just call me out of the blue and ask me to join their ministry. And that is exactly what happened. God answered my prayer precisely the way that I asked him to. Cindy is the director of Relentless Hope Ministry, and she got my number through a mutual friend. Cindy called me one day asking if I would join her ministry. So with tears streaming down my face, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that God was calling me to join her ministry. I will be speaking later in the evening, but first, I would like to introduce the speaker who will start off the evening, who is the director of Relentless Hope Ministry, and our director, Cindy Metcalf. So please give her a round of applause.
Okay, y'all know you're my guinea pigs. This is my first public speaking engagement, so here it goes. I want to thank you that you took your precious time to come here to hear what I have to say. I'm going to rely a lot on my notes, and pray for me that my voice doesn't quiver and my hands don't shake. You're beautiful. Thank you. So to start off, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and our organization. If my screen will, hold on one moment. All right, so Relentless Hope is a Christian organization located in Salt Lake City. I've been working with sex trafficking victims for about 5 years. I started in 2018 as an independent investigator researcher, but just recently started Relentless Hope in February of this year. In July of 2023, we got our 501c3, which makes us tax deductible. Also, we voted in our board of directors in September. And currently, we have a volunteer staff of 15 people. We have 10 people who are admins and advocates. The other 5 are an investigative team. So Relentless Hope helps those who are coming out of sex trafficking with resources, advocacy, and support that they need to heal. In addition, we work with counselors, lawyers, government agencies to help them get the practical resources they need, such as food, clothing, shelter. If they need to go on government assistance, we can help with that as well. What makes Relentless Hope different than other agencies is because we deal with sex trafficking complex cases. A lot of agencies don't want to deal with this issue, but it's very real in the state of Utah. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Utah is one of the most prevalent sex trafficking meccas in the United States. And I'm going to share with you some stats to help prove that. Then I'm going to tell you exactly how it works in this state. I'm not going to get gory or gross on you at all, but I want you to know what we're up against. The current definition of sex trafficking, I feel, is antiquated. The current is action or the practice of illegally transporting people from one country or area to another for the purpose of sexual exploitation. So what happened in September is we were invited to go speak to Burgess Owens Human Trafficking Committee. And what we did is we proposed legislation, because there are certain laws in Utah that need to be changed in order to protect children. We also proposed that the new definition of sex trafficking should be, in fact, the act of using a person for sexual exploitation in exchange for anything of value, whether that should be money, status, power, position, no matter where the abuse takes place. Some of our survivors were sex trafficked in their own homes. That's quite common. Our survivors are also trafficked through churches. Unfortunately, we focus on ritual abuse within religious organizations. And I hate to also tell you that this is happening across the U.S. It's pretty predominant. It doesn't really matter what denomination we're talking about, Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, LDS Church. So it's not just one particular denomination that we're talking about. So I have a story for you. So back in 2017, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Brett O'Hare came here to Salt Lake City. He was a statistical professor, and so he's always looking at numbers. And he spoke at Little America. And I had a friend who went to this presentation. And he gave his speech. He said, "This is interesting. I came here to tell you that while other states have about 200 to 300,000 missing children per decade," he goes, "Utah is missing over 1 million, and we can't figure out why." Okay. So my friend went up to talk to him afterwards, and she says, "I just want to ask you, why do you think we're missing so many kids?" And he says, "I don't know, but I suspect foul play." And she goes, "Did you ever consider sex trafficking as being the cause for that?" She said his eyes got as big as saucers, and we would have to agree with that, because I'm going to share with you some statistics. Unfortunately, Dr. Brett O'Hare died a year later of a brain tumor. You can look this information up online. I have my sources on the left. I know it's extremely small, but I can provide those sources later. Utah has the 9th highest age-adjusted suicide rate in the U.S. for teens. This was reported in 2020. And overall, we have a 66% higher suicide rate than the rest of the nation. In addition, antidepressant drugs are prescribed in Utah more than any other state at a rate that's nearly twice the national average. The biggest consumer of online pornography was Utah, and a study that was conducted by Harvard. I also have the source for that as well. So what this is telling me is that we got a big problem here. I think a lot of it has to do with the I-80 and I-15 corridor, but I think you're going to see very quickly what else is the issue. The reported government stats on sex trafficking are grossly underestimated, so the public isn't aware how big and how serious this problem is. So this is a chart, and I got this from the Utah Department of Health. So there's US, on average, females are the purple. Utah females for suicides is in yellow. For males, the US average is the red line, but you'll see Utah males, look how much higher we have in suicide rate. That tells me something's going on here. What's going on? Sex trafficking victimization. So victims are used for sex and labor. The abuse is usually excessive and extremely painful because it includes rape and torture. It's not what you think. It's not what you've heard in the past. The perpetrators have become more aggressive. These victims are not paid. They're not streetwalkers we're talking about. In addition, the victims are abused mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Over 80% of my clients were trafficked by their own parents. Can you imagine that? The parents are willingly giving up their children to this because it brings money, sex, and power to the men who do it. Sex starts at age birth, actually. As soon as they come out of the womb, they start these kids out because they're programming them, they're training them. It usually goes until age 8. There's a saying that the perpetrators say is if the child's 8, it's too late. They like them when they're young because they're easier to train. So the clients that we work with struggle with nightmares and flashbacks, insomnia, dissociative identity disorder, which is also known as multiple personality disorder. They have PTSD, depression and anxiety, and many of these survivors are misdiagnosed as bipolar or schizophrenic. They have spiritual bondages and demonic oppression. They have the inability to function usually. If they're abused between the age of birth to 18, you bet they're going to have problems. That's what we deal with. Some of them have physical problems. They have bowel issues. They have sexual dysfunction. They have UTIs. They have STDs, broken bones, scars, carvings. One of my survivors has a square and compass carved on her chest. As I said, they have a hard time with relationships, as you can imagine. They've been abused and used all their life, so 99% of my clients have divorced and have problems having normal functioning relationships with the rest of their family. The suicide rate is high, alcohol and drug use is high, and the perpetrators will keep coming back well into adulthood unless the cycle is broken. And that's what we help to do. We help break the cycle so they're not brought back in and trafficked. So, like I said, sex trafficking isn't about sex anymore. The victim is horribly abused. Sodomy, electrocution, beatings, cuttings. They want to make this as excruciating as possible because they want them to have DID. When they have DID, they can't recall the memories. In addition, they use drugs. So they would drug the child before they come in. That helps also erase the memory. My understanding is they use a drug called Special K, that's the street name, and it's morphine and ketamine, and it's very effective. They use other kinds of drugs. Some of my clients have been given LSD, so they hallucinate. And so the perpetrators can easily say, hey, you made this all up. Family members, you made this up. You were hallucinating. And some of them, unfortunately, don't make it out alive. So a vast majority of perpetrators do not get caught. Most perpetrators, if they are caught and prosecuted, they have light sentences, so 5 years or less. Pedophiles will abuse, on average, 180 children during their lifetime. 36% of the victims become perpetrators themselves. This is a generational problem, so it goes way far back. My oldest survivor is 82, so I know this has been going on since the 50s, and my youngest survivor is 3 years old. And like I said, this is happening in churches all over the country. I wish I could tell you otherwise. Victims are not lying. I hear satanic panic all the time, and I am so sick of hearing that because it's just simply not true. False memories, that's another thing people use. Oh, they're making it up. It's false memories. But no, listen, the American Psychological Association never ratified false memories. It's not even recognized by the highest institutions in the land. 93% of psychologists and counselors believe the survivors were telling them the truth when they were talking about what happened to them. They're taken at birth, provided by their parents usually. They're groomed at church or schools. The perps are white, clean-cut men usually, but women are involved in this. They're the kind of people that you would see going to church. I sat in front of a perpetrator, looked him into the eyes. He looked like the kindest, most grandpa-like man, gentleman. He was so courteous and nice, but I knew what he had done. And at the end of my talk with him, I revealed some things that I knew, because I already known at that point he had at least raped 3 of my clients at the time. And I kind of let the cat out of the bag, and he turned on me like a dime. His eyes just started piercing at me. He got visibly upset, and he walked out on me. You would never know. Some of these perps, and I'll tell you more who's all involved. Police are involved, politicians are involved, judges are involved, celebrities are involved, and the leaders in the church are involved. Locations, where does this happen? You're like, I don't see any of this happen. That's because it's happening in the middle of the night, but sometimes it happens in the middle of the day. So what exactly happens? I'll try to make this really brief. The kids are brought in through tunnels, underground tunnels. Salt Lake City has a massive tunnel system. You need to know that. It's real. Some of the children are dropped off by their own parents. Some of them are dropped off by other church members who take them to the location. They're stripped naked and they're drugged. And then they're brought into the ceremony room. I'm not going to get gross on you at all, but basically what happens is they're gang raped and they're tortured. This happens all in 3 hours' time because I got to get them in and out fast. It usually happens between midnight and 4 a.m. in the morning. And then they're cleaned up, so there's no evidence. Their clothes are put back on, and then they're sent home. So a lot of these kids who should be in those sex trafficking statistics aren't, because they're not counted in the stats. Because you can be sex trafficked in your own home by your own parents. So, like I said, it happens in the middle of the night. And then what happens is they have cleaners that come in. And the cleaners clean up all the blood. This is what's really going on here in Utah and other places. So there is no evidence. So what we financially need to help us, because we want to have rescue teams so we can help these survivors get out of the dangerous situations they're in. I have to have a certain amount of money to keep my doors open. So any donations you give tonight is going to help me cover licenses, software, hosting fees. We all work from our home, the volunteers. So we don't have a building, we don't have maintenance and overhead to pay. We are running this organization as efficiently as we can. And so we don't even keep paperwork. Everything's electronic behind firewalls, so the information can't be accessed. We also need help for our clients. They need tons of counseling. The average client will go through at least 9 years of counseling to even be able to function normally. We have legal expenses we need to cover. Travel expenses to actually help rescue some of these clients. We also need volunteers. We need an accountant. We need more advocates. We would love to have a consulting lawyer, rescue teams, and tech people. So now there's 2 ways that you can donate. You can donate via PayPal or Venmo. The QR codes are above. You'll also have an opportunity to pay by check and cash, if you'd like, out at the desk as you leave. I want to thank you for your time for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I believe God is behind this organization. We pray daily. We pray with these survivors because they're dealing with the demonic, and they're never going to truly be set free unless Jesus comes and frees them. It's a lifelong battle that they have to struggle with. And we walk beside them, we pray for them, we counsel them. We hear some of the most unimaginable things you can imagine that happens to a human body. So I appreciate, once again, and now we're going to play a video from one of our partnering agencies, Rescue America. They help us find placement and long-term shelters to help these clients. Thank you very much.
Hi. Hi, my name is Michelle, and I am the Chief Program Officer with Rescue America. And I just want to take a second to celebrate the beautiful work that Cindy and the team are doing there with Relentless Hope across your region. And we are so excited to be able to partner with you, Relentless Hope. Rescue America is a 24/7 rescue hotline that serves survivors all across the country. And it is our aim as we serve those survivors that call our hotline, that our team works with them and walks with them through that hotline, through that intake experience, and then prayerfully pairs them up into a home that has resources, a city that has resources to be able to come alongside of them to propel their healing and hope and help journey. And so we are thrilled at Rescue America to be able to link arms and lock shields with Relentless Hope as we all work and walk together to see survivors come out of darkness into his wonderful light and experience the healing and the hope that they're so worthy of. So we just want to celebrate what God is doing, and we are grateful to be able to serve together. And we just want to continue to encourage you in this fight and in the faith, and just continue to pray that you will see God move in mighty ways to serve those in your arena and in your sphere of influence and care. So thank you again, and we are honored to be able to partner with you, Relentless Hope.
All right, I said I was going to speak a little bit later in the night, and that is now. Again, I just want to let you know my name is Casey, and my husband is the pastor here at Canyon Road Church. So I was born here in Ogden and lived in Utah till I was 7, and then moved to the Midwest and met my husband at Bible College in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've been married for 17 years and have 4 children. We've served all over the world as missionaries and also have been pastoring in several states here in America. And we are so glad that God called us back to Utah. And we've been here at Canyon Road for 6 amazing years. I personally was first exposed to sex trafficking when I was a single missionary to Cambodia when I was 20 years old. Cambodia is in Southeast Asia by Thailand, if you didn't know where it is. When I would have to get across town, since I didn't have a car, I would have to ride on the back of motorcycle taxis to get where I needed to go. And every day when I would drive on a motorcycle taxi, I would pass through a neighborhood that broke my heart. Outside on the streets, in front of brothels, were little girls as young as 10 years old being sold. Their faces were plastered with makeup, but their eyes were filled with pain and emptiness. I would see old white men walking around town holding hands with these young girls, and I was filled with rage. I thought, how is this happening under our noses? How is this allowed? 14 years ago, my husband and I moved overseas to the country of Azerbaijan to be missionaries with our firstborn little baby girl. We were able to do relief and development work and share the gospel, but one event stands out in our minds. If you've ever heard of Operation Christmas Child, you can fill shoe boxes, like the ones we have over there, with toiletries and toys, and the ministry will send it overseas to children in need. Well, my husband got to partner with a ministry in Azerbaijan, handing out those shoe boxes to children while their parents were given a lesson on the dangers of human trafficking and how to keep their kids safe. So I think that most people can comprehend that trafficking happens in third world countries where there's poverty, war, and famine. But a lot of Americans are struggling with the concept that sex trafficking happens here. So once I started learning that trafficking is happening here in America, I started researching and praying, saying, God, how can I get involved here? I don't live overseas anymore. Help me to help survivors here and now. I remember during that first phone call that I told you about when Cindy asked me to join her ministry, she jumped right in and said, I also want you to start leading the survivor support groups. I immediately was shocked in disbelief and felt inadequate for that position. Likewise, many of you here, you may feel like I felt. You may have an awareness of trafficking, but you don't know how to support survivors, and you don't know where to start. But we hope that after tonight's message, that you will not only understand more about sex trafficking, but you will find out and realize there are ways you can join our ministry and help us today with survivors. Cindy saw the potential in me, and she waited patiently for months until I was ready to lead the survivor support groups. And now I can see the Holy Spirit was empowering me all along since I've been leading them. But I was nervous at first, but I'm so grateful that Cindy pushed me. I'll just tell you a little bit about what I do for Relentless Hope. I am a victim advocate. I'm a board member, a treasurer, and lead the survivor support groups monthly. And as Cindy said earlier in the message, our ministry was recently given the opportunity to meet with Congressman Burgess Owens' Human Trafficking Task Force, and we were able to give our opinion on legal issues that could help survivors here in America. I can't even begin to express to you the deep gratitude we feel on staff when we get to help a survivor through their healing journey. When a survivor thanks us for believing them. When a survivor chooses to follow Jesus Christ. When a survivor decides they want to help other survivors in their healing journey. So we are excited for all that God has for Relentless Hope Ministry and how you might be a part of it. Thank you for coming tonight and giving of your time and your energy to hear this crucial message. Thank you for trusting us and being willing to learn from what we have to say. We are so grateful for your support and your prayers, and we pray that God would bless you abundantly. Thank you.
Or do you want me to just jump up? Okay. Okay. Good evening. I'm so glad you guys are here tonight. I'm excited to be here myself. That might sound a little counterintuitive just because I am going to be telling a story about what I grew up with, what my life was like, and how that applies here. So it's a little bit fun, a little bit interesting for me to be here and actually be sharing this story. It's sharing a little bit of my experience here. Mainly because I lived here. I lived in Ogden from 4th grade to 9th grade, and I wished I could say it was my favorite time of my life, but it wasn't. And at the time, I really even couldn't tell you why. I just knew that I didn't like it. I remember leaving when we moved away. We moved to El Paso, Texas, and then we moved to Wyoming, and then I went to college and stuff, and I would tell people, Ogden, that was the worst time of my life. And I couldn't even back it up and tell you why. It wasn't until I was about 37 years old when I started some therapy and I really started digging into what was going on and why I was depressed that I actually figured out what was going on, especially during this time in my life. But it didn't start when I was in 4th grade. It started at birth. My life, if you were going to ask me right when I was younger, if you were going to ask me what my life was like, I would say, just, normal, typical family situation. Lived in an average neighborhood. And like I said, until I actually really had a huge bout of depression and took some steps to actually pursue that and got some help from a therapist, that I was able to start really piecing things together and figuring that out. I would have been one of those children that never hit the statistics. I was one of those children who from birth had experiences and had specific training and conditioning and programming that was actually went along kind of a mind control handbook. This training included anal rapes, but when you're thinking about little children, it's not necessarily going to be the way you think it is. Objects, fingers, things like that. work really well because the objective here isn't necessarily sexual. The objective is to create a severing and an isolation so that, as Cindy was saying, the multiple personalities or the DID or whatever it is, that becomes available to the perpetrators, to the parents, to those who are actually going to be training the children and using them in other situations, such as human trafficking situations, such as, human bartering, such as I want to say the word chattel, being used in such a manner. Part of my healing process was actually really coming to terms with that was my purpose. And that was just kind of a real mind bend. And so I think maybe as you're listening to some of the things that Nicole and I share with you tonight, it's a little hard to understand, and it should be really hard to understand, how this even happens. And I went through that myself. I was actually trying to figure out, once I started really coming to terms with what was going on, really working with the fact that there was betrayal and that I was just kind of a pawn in a bigger scheme, it was really devastating. It was very betraying. So the stats that she was sharing with you, the methods in which I was born into, because I was born into a family that was very involved in and immersed in this well-organized human trafficking organization. And this human trafficking organization, and I'm just making it very, very calm, is very, very well-funded. It's very well-connected. And so from a very young age, the way the physiological brain works, this organization and these people that do this understand the human biological system better than we ever really know that they did. So if you can affect a body through an anal rape, through that kind of a violation and penetration, it actually travels up your spine, hits your brain stem, and there's a little chemical result that bursts. There's parts of those nerve endings that will burst, and that creates receptacles for different personalities and different programmings. And they know how to access that too. They also bank on trauma. They bank on dissociation. They bank on the drugs. They bank on the ceremonies. They bank on all kinds of spiritual terrorization to all be present so that as the children that are present grow up, this still follows along with them. I remember when I was about 10 years old, and I was living here in Ogden. I remember exactly where I was. It's kind of funny, I went to Mount Ogden Junior High and we lived behind McCady Hospital. And there's a number of stories that I remember coming up with, realizing while we were living there. But I remember when I was about 10, and I was old enough to start tracking myself. I was old enough to kind of start recognizing that there were particular things that I called episodes. There were episodes that were pretty repetitive, and it was kind of curious to me because I could feel them coming on. They actually had a sensation to them. And accompanying this, the sensation that was there was self-loathing. There was deep, deep anguish and despair that really seemed, I guess for me at my age, I didn't have the verbiage or the way to really relate to that. But it was greater, really, really greater than would be normal. But I didn't know what normal was, really. It was just how I felt. So I dubbed them pity parties. I could feel it when these pity parties were going to come on. And there was this one particular time that I want to tell you about that really got accentuated. And I knew when I would have these pity parties, the other thing that was accompanying it was the fact that I knew without a shadow of a doubt that the world would be better off without me. That was the phrasing. The world would be better off without me. And I couldn't think of anybody that would miss me. I couldn't think of anybody or anything that I was actually good for. In fact, my existence was going to be really taxing on the planet, on my family, on people that I was aware of, whatever. So if you happen to know me, and I'm crying, doing a very terrible job at holding back the tears, but a very excellent job at really repressing the amount of true anguish that was there. And I would tell you, I would never say I don't deserve to live. That was not the language that was there for me. It was the world would be better off without me. And there's a key thing there, because I don't deserve to live is a whole different phrasing than my compassionate sacrifice to the world because it would be better off without me. Do you see the difference here? The whole psyche, I don't deserve to live, is one way to look at it. The world would be better off without me is a whole different way to look at it. And that's the way that it would show up for me. So if you were standing there and I would just say, the world would be better off without me, you would probably try to assure me and say, oh, no, that's not true. I love you. Your parents love you. The kids at school would miss you. And not one part of me, even though I would hear you, the separation and the isolation that had already been established within me. Remember, I'm 10. It was so well established that those words and even your willingness and honesty could not anchor in. And I'm going to take it a step further. You could tell me that Jesus loved me, and you could tell me that God loved me. You could tell me I was the most valuable thing to God in his sight. And the isolation and separation, and it's not even disbelief. There was just no place for that to land. It wasn't even available. There was one particular day, and I felt this coming on, that this anguish was really starting to roll up, and I could feel it coming on. And so I walked outside and I went out on the back porch because I certainly didn't want to cry and have my pity party around where my family could see me. And I remember sitting out on the porch and feeling completely consumed with this, and it kind of went up a notch. And I started, for the first time, contemplating how I would kill myself. Started contemplating where and how this would actually happen. And I was okay that there was going to be a time commitment. I was okay all of this because the world would be better off without me. And that was taking hold of me so strong that I can't say that it got paralyzing, but I kind of got a little obsessed with it. Like I was really, really involved with it. And the one thing that broke the spell of that was as I was sitting there, my family dog still gets me emotional. Came up and sat next to me, licked my hand, and that snapped me out of it right away. And what I realize now is that my innocence and the truth of who I am, connected with the innocence and the truth and the genuineness of that animal, of my dog, to actually break that spell. Didn't heal it, didn't cure it. It broke me out of that. And so where I went next wasn't how am I going to kill myself? Because I am going to tell you the long-term effect of that particular thing, it didn't rid me of thinking about suicide or even conditioning or even considering it, because as I started remembering it, getting into the healing, that program acted up again. And it's meant to, because there are certain things about the way that you are conditioned within this particular group that there are programs in place to keep the group safe by not being exposed and by keeping the people in line that they have actually conditioned, which is you've got a self-elimination program or a suicide program, which is kind of a self-harming program, and you also have a reporter-recorder program where you're recording everything that's going on in your life. And if you have a handler, basically my parents in this case, that would even ask you particular questions. I mean, I had a photographic memory. I mean, I could tell my dad exactly where I'd been or verbatim conversations that I would have had 2 weeks prior, thinking that I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool little superpower I've got here. So I was highly aware of it, but I didn't understand that it was a program and it was a tool being used to track me and track others. And also track how well I was staying within the programming that was happening. So this is a lot more complex than just being transported somewhere, being terrorized, tortured, and raped, cleaned up, and then taken home. The way that they keep the kids and the people, because we grow up, it's not just kids and they're out. you grow up, you become an adult, and the programs and the brainwashing and the self-loathing are still active until you heal. So what happened in this particular situation was I changed my thought from how to kill myself into how to run away. And where I went as a 10-year-old, and that in my mind at that time, was to my grandparents. I could go to my dad's family, I could go to my mom's family. I immediately knew I couldn't go to my dad's family because no part of me felt safe there. So I considered going to my mom's side of the family. They had a farm. I felt safer there, I guess. I wouldn't even call it safe necessarily, but I felt more comfortable with that option. And they only lived about a 25-minute drive away. So we lived in Ogden, and they lived out in Syracuse and Clearfield. And I thought, oh, we could go there. And then immediately I realized, yeah, but the minute I get there, and I'm thinking about packing my bag or whatever it was, riding my bike, how I'm going to get out to Clearfield. And I realized immediately, yeah, but the minute I get out there, they're just going to bring me right back. So immediately I understood very clearly what it felt like to feel very hopeless and unable to help myself. This is something that I really appreciate about Relentless Hope, because when, as an adult, and remember, I did not do any of my healing until I was 37 years old. As an adult, when you feel that helpless and hopeless, when things start coming up, there is that same thought process. You may consider, as she was showing you on the stats, some of the people, the programming, the hopelessness, helplessness, and the thought processes that aren't genuine to them but are definitely present, are running this phrasing, the world would be better off without you, or whatever it is that's personalized to them. And they end up following through on that. In my case, that never got that far. But I also knew that I had no place to turn. So when you have an organization that even for adults, somebody can ask the question, where do I go? What do I do? Who's going to listen to me? Who's going to believe me? The thing that's so impressive and so great about Relentless Hope, the passion that created it, the dedication of the volunteers, that kind of availability is a big deal, because they understand that they're not dealing with somebody that's just been diagnosed with a particular name that needs to be on particular medications. They begin to listen behind those things. They begin to listen to different levels of what somebody is saying, and they understand that there's something more. There's something else to ask. And from the information that they both start getting, the healing that can break through on this is incredible. My healing journey, I didn't have something like Relentless Hope. I, by the grace of God, found a therapist that actually understood this. And I was able to start recovering memories. And you got to understand, too, for many, many, many of these children, many of these children that grew into adulthood, there is a very specific and clear path of sexual violation, of drugging, of all of this that is going to help them and really guarantee the repression of the details in the memories. Sometimes they leak through in dreams, sometimes they leak through in waking terrors, that kind of thing. Sometimes they're actually right next to them and accompanying them. They don't know what to do with it. But this kind of help does help with the healing. This kind of availability gives somebody else some hope. And that's what's so amazing and so beautiful here. I took 9 years of therapy. That's how long it took me to actually work through my process. My process was really thorough, too. I have a lot of details. And I need to help you understand, too, is like all of my memories were repressed. I had no idea that this was going on. Had absolutely none. I did have some nightmares. I did have some other things. But I'm going to tell you, I really thought I came from a normal family. Then I got depressed. Then is when I looked for... I had the opportunity, and this is important, and then I'll kind of wrap things up. I was living with this trauma, but it was starting to burst out in different ways, in actions and things that I didn't understand, that were completely contrary to what I knew myself to be as a human, as a good person even, as somebody that did love God, you know. And was really disturbing to me. And I actually did get the contact number for this therapist. And it got really bad one day, so I picked up the phone, and then I had in front of me the phone number of the therapist, but I didn't dial that number. I dialed the number to talk to my dad. My dad was my handler. My dad was the one that was taking me to all of these things. My dad was the main person that was selling me. The parents, the grandparents, aunts and uncles. This is the fastest and most direct way to get a hold of a child without anybody knowing about it, because that's the way it works. The child could never possibly fathom that it's somebody that is so close to them, that is supposed to be so loving and dear to them, is supposed to and will say that they are protecting them and taking care of them. That was my waking, knowing memory of my dad. But what was actually happening is he was the one driving me there. He was the one selling me. He was the one delivering me. He was the one actually paying the men as they came up and drove up in front of our house with some kind of bread truck and taking me and putting me in there as they handed him cash, and off we went. And then I came home. I would have never been ever reported in any of these statistics. So as I started getting to where I wanted to know myself differently than this depressed individual that seemed very, very odd and not familiar to me, because I'm usually a very happy, gregarious, and outgoing individual, I found it interesting that I called my dad instead of a therapist, even though the therapist's phone number was there. I followed programming. I want you guys to know that. The program is to contact and tell the people that you love and trust the very most about what's going on inside of you and how crazy you're feeling. If you have a situation like was mine, the person you're going to be telling is your handler. And then they would know where to take you, where to put you, and what to do with you. I called my dad. Hey, can we go to lunch? I've got some really huge things going on. His answer was absolutely. But your mom and I are getting on the cruise ship, and we're in Florida right now, and we won't be back for 10 days. But when I get back, let's get together. And I'm like, okay. I hang up the phone and I dialed the therapist. I couldn't stand it anymore. And for me, that was the grace of God. That was the moment that I was guided to call him, and that my perpetrator was not anywhere close to me. And I had none of this in my consciousness. I didn't know. I was just going crazy. I needed to talk to somebody. Talked to the therapist, filled out his forms. He looked at it and he says, yeah, we can work together. I says, well, how long do you think this will take? He goes, well, let's give it a couple months and see what was happening. What I heard was, let's give it a couple of months and you'll be cured. I was like, cool, I can do that. That is not the way this went. 9 years later, I'm finally going, oh, okay, now I see where we are. But that's that whole journey of healing was so liberating. But I cannot even tell you how many times I walked out of that office after really pulling, like having my body remember, my emotions remember, my spirit remember, seeing the horrendous things that I did, and really, really, really feeling it viscerally, knowing that behaviors were changing, knowing that I am turning into a whole different person, and I would still walk out of there going, who does this? I am certifiable. This is crazy. And the one thing I wanted so badly was validation. And that is like the purpose of my mission. This is where I feel I can really step in, because I want to validate others. You're not crazy. This is just part of the process. You're getting rid of stuff that's meant to be crazy making. I don't know how long it's going to take you. It took me 9 years. I'm still working on myself, but I know what I'm working with. And I have tools to do that. And I'm telling you, I believe, especially in Cindy and I, love that woman. The things that we've been able to share with each other and the things that I've been able to share with her about what was going on has filled in the blanks on some of these things. And this is such a great organization. If you really honestly feel that there's this, you want to help in any way, then I would ask you, like, when you're in the situation of a victim that is really looking for and asking for and reaching out for help, you need a little bit more outside help. You need a little bit more divine help, and you need a lot of prayers. So, pray. Definitely. If you can feel it, if you feel guided, definitely donate in a way that really feels good to you. Volunteer. Send in some money. Ask anybody. Cindy, ask any of the volunteers that are here, how can I help? Do you need prayers today? Whatever it is that's coming forward for you, all of it helps. Now, I know Nicole's gonna come up here and she's gonna tell you her story. And she said something before this meeting started that I thought was really, really valid. She's like, I've got so much to say. My story is massive. And I'm like, me too. We have so much that we could share with you. It's almost like throw out a subject and there was something that we could actually just say, yeah, you know what, I can relate to that, or I understand where you're coming from with that. It's not a simple situation. This is very complex, it's very layered, it's very deep. When Cindy was talking about the tunnel system in Salt Lake City, been there. It's a real thing. And what it's connected to and how it's connected is very real. And there was one thing I wanted to actually add. One of the ways that I was transported was in a hearse. Who's going to stop a hearse? It was a really, they have cleanup crews. They have people that are present at those experiences, whether you're being trafficked, whether you're being sold. They have entire, and I will say this, there was one situation out at the fairgrounds, it was highly organized, where it was open air bidding on children, bidding on girls. And unless you were invited to that, you would be driving right by and you would just see that there was an event going on and you would probably keep driving by. This is happening in your backyard. I used to live here. It's happening all over the place. And I think that's one of the hardest things to actually comprehend. Because you want to know, you're just like, well, how could this possibly be? What is shocking is how many people you know that are victims. But what's even more shocking would be how many people you know that are actually perpetrators. This is not to say walk around being scared, because in all of this, my personal opinion is God knows what's going on. He's got a handle on this, but he's also asking us to join his army. He's also asking us to do what I liked what she was saying, link shields, full armor of God. I really appreciate you guys being here tonight. Thank you for listening. I am here if you have any questions. Cindy's here if you have any questions, so are the other volunteers. Please find out, ask anything that you want to do, anything. And if we don't know, we'll tell you, and that gives us even another place to head towards. We're used to connecting dots and following breadcrumbs. So anyway, thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate that.
Good evening. My story is a little different, and I've really just been praying about how to present this. There is just so much, and I don't have that much time, and I'm not going to take all your time. The programming for me, I never really thought about it as being programmed. It really wasn't until I got involved in this group, and even when I first went to the first meeting, I'm like, what am I doing here? Not because I hadn't experienced the things that my friend who invited me to the group, the reason she sent me there, but because the general group. Okay, background. I was raised very eclectic. My mother was raised kind of in the Episcopal Church, Anglican sort of thing, and then my dad was the Baptist. My mom was a legitimate flower child. UC Berkeley, Woodstock, you name it, she was there. Got kicked out of UC Berkeley because of her hippie movement. She never, ever wanted to be pregnant. She never wanted to be a mother. She got married to my dad. She tried everything to prevent pregnancy, pills, IUDs, everything. She got pregnant with twins, me and my brother. As soon as she found out she was pregnant, she tried to abort us. In California, it was legal to get an abortion, but she was married. Because she was married, she had to have the consent of her husband. She told my dad she was pregnant, and he wanted us, so she couldn't do that. She was 7.5 months long, found out she was having twins, because there was no ultrasound back then. It was heartbeats. And apparently I was hiding behind my brother. So she didn't find out until she was 7.5 months. When she found out she was having twins, she wanted to place us for adoption. So I was never wanted, ever. And the programming I had growing up was, you're a burden. Don't be a burden. Don't be a child. Don't have emotions. You can't cry. You can't be angry. You can't have feelings. You get to sit there in the corner, and it is literally, I was raised with the children are to be seen and not heard. I'm not exactly sure what I went through yet that put me in the place of being vulnerable, but I do know that my mother practiced witchcraft. She was a Wiccan for a few years when I was younger. But I think the molestation started before then. Because I'm a twin, I have very early memories. I have verifiable memories from the time I was 6 months old up. And I've been able to verify those because there were people I remembered, things that happened, and I would go and I'd ask my grandma, and I'd say, Grandma, did we ever have a black lady in the family? And I remember this lady that used to feed me, and she said, yes. She says, that was Wanda. She was my housekeeper from the time you were 6 months old until you were 18 months. So I remember having conversations with my brother before we could even speak English, but we were twins. So first time I was molested that I can remember, and I did not remember this until I was 19, 20 years old. All I knew, so I was 18 months old, it was from a babysitter's son. My whole life I grew up hating, and I mean hating, despising Elvis Presley music. I could watch him in a movie, no problem. Everybody around me loved him. I could not stand listening to his music. Every time his music played, I cringed. I wanted to change it if I had control in any way, or I'd leave the room. Couldn't stand it. When the memory came back, I was 18 months old, still in diapers. We were at my babysitter's house, and I had a wet diaper. The babysitter told her son to take me in the room to go change me. He had a friend with him, and they put on a record player, and it was Elvis Presley music. And they proceeded to molest me. I was 3 when my brother and I were put through ritualistic abuse by my Baptist grandfather, who was a Freemason. And that memory didn't come back until I was 22 and had my first child. I was going through postpartum, and it was really bad postpartum. It was postpartum psychosis. I was homicidal and suicidal. I felt like I had no control over any of it. I was calling people to help me, and they hung up on me in the church. God intervened in a lot of ways, but one, I started counseling when I was 19, and it was by the grace of God. I moved up here. I was born and raised in Southern California. I moved up here when I was 19 years old. This happens to be one of the first churches that I ever attended. Pastor Ray Weed actually did my baptism for me. I had been baptized 8 times as a child. I was one of the bus ministry in the 70s, My parents would just ship us off to whichever church said, hey, we'll take your kids off your hands on Sundays. We'll bring a bus around. And so I've been baptized at the Methodist Church, the Lutheran Church, the Baptist Church, the Episcopal Church. You name it. It's like, because I was told, well, you have to be baptized at our church. Oh, okay. And, whatever. Plus, it got my parents to go to church. The healing journey is not easy. And one of the biggest things that I struggled with is because the people that were supposed to protect me were the perpetrators, because they took me to church and told me I was supposed to love God, and they molested me under that guise. I came to understand I have struggled a lot my whole life with doubt. Doubting God, who He is, that He really loves me, that I'm not just a burden, that I actually have a purpose in this world. I still struggle with it. I'm almost 55 years old. Because there's something in me. Just like you said, Asia, you can tell me I'm the most important thing in the world to Him, that I've heard it a million times. If you were the only person left on the earth, He would still die for you. Okay, I love Him. I serve Him. I love Him with all my heart. I trust Him because I have to. Not because it's a duty thing, but because, like I said, I can't go into everything, but the experiences I have had in my life, I know the enemy's real. I know it beyond the shadow of a doubt. I've had firsthand experiences with it. And I simply, by a process of elimination, if that's real, then He's got to be real. I may not experience Him the way I want to experience Him all the time. I did have breakthrough several years ago after my first divorce. And God took me on such an incredible journey that even took me and led me up to that point. And the other thing I want to say, as you're watching for symptoms in these children, there are things to look for. I found out later, walking around and wetting your diaper and wetting it to the point, now this was cloth diapers days, okay? Not Pampers. But those bladder issues, peeing your bed, so children who pee the bed at night, children who have nightmares, and I'm talking about night terrors is what they call them. If you're in church and you're talking to children and they are talking if they're being open with you and they love Jesus, but then they struggle, those are signs to look for. Because when the perpetration happens, I was taught that God was the one who caused all of this, that he made me for this, that I was literally dedicated to this God. To be his wife, to be a procreator, to be used in whatever way anyone wanted. My feelings, my boundaries, my health meant nothing. I had to be quiet and take it. I was raised with very narcissistic people. And that's one of the things to look for as well. Look at the people raising them. Are they narcissistic people? And that's just a term I didn't even realize. You know, back in my day, it was self-absorbed, it was egotistical, it was arrogant. Somebody had used the term narcissism with my twin brother years ago. I'm like, what's that even mean? You know, and again, it's just kind of the whole self-absorbed thing. Well, it's not just self-absorbed. There's a whole lot more to it. And I realized that because of what I had experienced and the training that I had been through, those are the type of people that I kept perpetuating in my life. My mother, God rest her soul, and I love her. She died in 2017 of cancer. Well, no, pneumonia. She had cancer for years, survived it. It started to come back, but she had her own issues. And in the healing, my healing, and in anybody's healing, forgiveness of the perpetrator is one of the biggest things that has to be done. And it's been a series of things that has happened, but one of probably the key thing that helped me was when I was on the mission field. We did a series called Healing the Wounded Woman. It's got a different name now. And they had us go through the exercise of holding a baby doll in our hands and realizing that the people who had hurt us were once these babies. And they too had been hurt. They too had been abused or tormented or whatever put them in the place of thinking that allowing that to continue is acceptable. It's normal. It's what they know. And we have to come to that place where the mind is turned and healed and recognizing that it is not normal. It's not healthy. It is not what we were created for. It's not what God wants for any of his children. I was blessed. I got saved down at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, years ago, 1987. And I moved up here in February of 1988 after a short stint in the Air Force, and I got medical discharge. God brought me here. He had a plan for me to be here because I was going to be a jet engine mechanic. I would have ended up here anyway. It was Hill Air Force Base or Ramstein. And I was introduced to a pastor up here when I finally found the Calvary Chapel up here. I was introduced to Dave Hakela, who was also a seminary teacher down in Salt Lake, at Salt Lake Seminary, and a pastor and a teacher and, umpteen other things. He was also a counselor, and he specialized in SRA and people. Our church was full of broken people. Witchcraft and New Age and, you name it, all kinds of backgrounds and broken people, because he counseled. And he counseled us. And he's the one that helped me when that memory of the actual ritual that I was put through when I was 3, when that came back to my memory, I did not want to believe that it was a memory. I'm like, no, it just can't be. So I had a session with him, and I'm like, it's got to be a dream, from a dream or something. I must be remembering a dream or a movie or something. And I told it to him, and he says, He says, that's not a dream. He said, that's a memory. He says, you have way too much detail in that. Way too much detail. You don't have that much detail in a dream. You don't have that much detail in remembering a movie. And I never watched movies like that. I mean, I was into Stephen King and stuff when I was younger, but then when I got saved, I was like, even RoboCop, I had to leave the theater. It was too much for me. I was like, nope, too gross. So that was really hard and very devastating for me to realize that had happened, and especially from somebody that I had trusted and that had helped raise me, and that I looked up to. He was in the Air Force. He was a test pilot for the B-29. He flew in World War II. He was everything. So there's a lot of things I'm still dealing with. I went through counseling for years. And I finally got to the place where I was like, God, I am sick and tired of dealing with the past. When am I going to be done dealing with the past so I can deal with the present? I had already been through the mission field. I had been married. I had children. I was in the church. I became an ordained minister. All of this stuff. And I'm like, when is it going to be over? For me, 15 years. Finally, I got breakthrough. Finally, the past was behind me, and I was able to deal with the present, because depression been my closest friend. Growing up, my whole life. I've been on and off meds, and I refuse. I'm like, no. There comes a point where we have to decide. We are going to face this head on. What's the term? Basically, face the giant. But look, all the ugly, you have to be tenacious enough to say, you know what? No, I'm going to step forward, I'm going to deal with this, and I'm going to push through it, because there is no way around this mountain. There just isn't. You have to just do it. And I'll tell you the difference between somebody who chooses to do it and somebody who doesn't. I told you I have a twin brother, had a twin brother. I tried to talk to him one time about what happened to us when we were 3. And he refused. He said, I don't care what happened to me in the past. I'm not going to talk about my past. I'm not going to live in my past. I'm just facing this right now, right here, right now. And I'm like, because we were also abused by some step siblings later on in my dad's second marriage, both of us. And then we were also molested by cousins. So it's a perpetual thing. You know, it happens. It sets you up. And it's very difficult to break free from. But he refused to deal with his past. He embraced the voices that he heard. I ran towards God. He ran towards what we were raised with: drugs, alcohol, witchcraft, every kind of spiritual anything. When we were 19, I was trying to talk to him. He said he got saved. He was in a church. Got saved in a church. Got mentored by a couple who taught him transcendental meditation in a church. That opened him up to a whole bunch of stuff. And he went from JC and me, we're friends. Yeah, we're good together. He literally had a license plate made, JC and me. And I said, what's that? What's that for? He says, you know, Jesus Christ and me, we're friends, we're good. Okay. And I had already been saved at this point. And then Jesus was his spirit guide. Then Jesus was an alien. My brother was one of the Mount Shastians in California that they literally, there's a whole cult up there that believe that there is a UFO buried under Mount Shasta. And when Jesus comes again, woohoo, it's going to break through the mountain. Jesus is on it. He's going to beam me up, Scotty. Everybody who follows. Okay, that's the Mount Shastians. Then, let's see, where'd he go from there? My mom got cancer. And, oh, no. So it was JC and me were friends. Then he was his spirit guide. Then he was an alien. Yeah. And then my mom got breast cancer when she was 51. And he suddenly became God. He was the Alpha and Omega. And he was going to cure my mother of her cancer. Then, my brother was tormented. He was in the Navy. He went through the SEAL program twice. Passed all the physical stuff. He could not get past the psychological evaluation because he was honest. And he said, I hear voices, and I don't want them to go away. So he would not take medication, and they did not pass him through the program. He got himself kicked out of the Navy a year and a half later because he couldn't handle it. He was brilliant. He worked at JPL as a contractor. Brilliant. But went from I am the Alpha and Omega to I am Lucifer reincarnated in order to redeem my way back into heaven. That's what happens when you try to deal with this on your own. The enemy gets hold of you, and he drags you down deeper and deeper and deeper. And like I said, I know the experiences I had growing up. So, process of elimination. And I know God's there. I'm just going through another tough season. It happens. I have my good days. I have my not so good days. But God is still good. And I'm going to hold on to that. Anyway, thank you.
Wow, I just want to thank our survivors. It takes a lot of courage and peace to come and share these stories, and I just want to thank you for opening up your heart and opening up about your past and sharing with us. I think it helps for people to hear from survivors and see how God has healed them and helped them in their lives. So we are finished with our fundraiser. We want to let you know that at the information table, if you came in this way, you can speak to any of us on staff about how you can get involved. Like we said, we need boots on the ground. We need people helping in all sorts of ways. And so if you're interested, contact us and we can have interviews with you or phone calls with you talking about what you are willing to do, how much you want to volunteer, etc. You're not signing your life away and have to help us 40 hours a week. Just we want to start a conversation and see how you're feeling God leading you. And we have the ability for you to give donations here. And like we said, we have the QR code. You can do a donation through that. Also, we'll have treats and beverages in the coffee shop just straight that way. We would love for you guys to stay and just converse with us as staff or each other and have treats. I just wanted to have our staff come on stage and pray for you guys so you can see who we all are. So tonight, if you want to come talk to us, you can see us. Would you guys come up on the stage? Sorry, you didn't know I was going to do that. Is Lisa gone? She's talking to somebody? She's doing her job. All right. Here. Come on up. You're on staff, Amethyst. Yes. Lisa's coming. We covet your prayers. We feel the spiritual warfare as staff. We feel the enemy coming after us when we are helping survivors. So please pray over us, our safety, our mental health, as well as the safety, mental health, and spiritual freedom of our survivors. When they take steps towards freedom, they are attacked emotionally, spiritually, physically, and it can scare them in their healing journey. So your prayers are so important to us. So I'm just going to close in prayer and pray over our staff as well. Jesus, I thank you so much for Relentless Hope Ministry and that you gave Cindy the vision, the passion, and the faith to start this ministry, not knowing where you would take it, not know who would be on staff with her, but you are already working in our hearts, and you've brought us together, and we're so excited for how more people will be joining our ministry. More people will be stepping up to the plate and saying, trafficking stops here, it stops with us, and we want to bring healing to our survivors and awareness. I pray that you would empower us every day as we are speaking with survivors, as we are helping them on their healing journey, sometimes helping people be rescued to leave a dangerous situation. Go before us as we just serve you and you alone, Jesus, and do this for you. And I pray that you'd go before every person tonight. I pray that they'd be touched by tonight's message. And if they can't work with our ministry or donate, I pray that they would pray and that they would keep their eyes open and that they would share the awareness that this ministry has been teaching so that they can be a part of helping survivors find freedom in America and in Utah specifically. We thank you for this night. In your name we pray. Amen. Please stay and have treats with us in the coffee shop and stop by the information booth and talk to any of us. We'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you for coming.
All my days, I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up till I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. In darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. Hey, 'cause all my